Thank you so much, both for inviting me and for an amazing festival, Festival B. So I asked this morning, what does it stand for? It stands for what I've dedicated my life to, biodiversity. We are, after all, part of one Earth family. Another word of that Earth family is biodiversity. And at least in my cultural tradition, we were brought up with the recognition that the Earth is for all beings. No one being has a right to take the share of others, because that is, in effect, a crime. I was very happy to hear from Martin the ruling on the climate change issue in your courts, that there's a duty to care. And we've been made to believe that climate change is about this much parts per million in the atmosphere, nothing to do with us. Bees dying, nothing to do with us. Well, the bees produce 1/3 of the food we eat. We've done scientific research on our biodiversity farm in Dehradun, and I hope some of you will at some point be able to make a journey, not only to Navdanya, the movement I started 31 years ago to protect biodiversity, but also to Earth journeys we are now undertaking, to communities that live their life in with biodiversity and live with higher well-being, higher happiness, higher prosperity, more abundance of food. It's about balance. Any monoculture is out of balance. Any hierarchy is out of balance, and it's only held in place by violence and force. Whereas when you have biodiversity, the balance is part of the self-organizing system. So when we grow 2,000 crop varieties on the Navdanya farm. We don't have pests. We have lots of insects. We have 6 times more pollinators on the farm than in the forest. Why are there pests wherever there are monocultures and where there's industrial farming? Because when you grow only one crop, then one insect has a feast and it becomes a pest. And then you think that spraying a poison is the way to kill it. Well, they're smart. They evolve resistant. They become super pests. Then we thought we can do genetic engineering to control weeds. Roundup ready soya, Roundup ready corn. And we can put toxins into a plant, the BT cotton. Not even 20 years has shown that the bollworm, which was supposed to be destroyed by the GMO cotton, has become resistant and is destroying the cotton and the farmers. Last year I was visiting Vidarbha, which is the center of India, where cotton evolved. And it became the capital of BT cotton, the GMO cotton. Illegally introduced, I still have a case in my courts on the illegal introduction by Monsanto of the BT cotton. The bollworm started to become resistant. Last year, the farmers were spraying so much pesticide, even though the advertising for the GMO cotton was, you'll never need to spray ever again. That I went to a local hospital, 130 farmers had died in one season in India because of pesticide spray. And according to the UN rapporteur on food, Hilal Elva, she put out a report last year, there are 200,000 deaths, direct deaths, because of pesticide poisoning annually. Now, if it was happening through anything else, if it was killing a group of people because of the color of their skin, we would call it ethnic cleansing. And all those people get tried in the Court of Justice, International Criminal Court, which is in your country. That's where 2 years ago we brought a Monsanto tribunal. Because after spending more than 35 years looking at agriculture, I have come to the conclusion that the big players who've pushed chemicals into farming and created the monocultures that are driven by the chemicals in farming, that they have really engaged in a century of genocide and half a century of ecocide. When I say genocide, what was happening in Hitler's concentration camps? People were being gassed to death, either for their religion or for their politics. IG Farben was the group of companies that was making these gases that kill. Xylon B. All the pesticides that were derived after the war come from that technology. It's an expertise to kill. It is not an absolute improvement in our knowledge, but it is an improvement if what you're thinking of is food as war, life as war, agriculture as war. And I have watched this enter into my land. I grew up in the mountains, 3,000 feet above sea level, not below. Very different imagination. I went to do my MSc honors in physics to a part of India called Punjab, which means the land of 5 rivers. Panj is 5, Ab means water. And it was a prosperous land, the richest part of India. Proud farmers. The religion of Sikhs, the people who wear the turban, that Guru Nanak started, that's the land. But in the 60s, chemical agriculture was introduced in this land in the name of the Green Revolution. I always say it was not green and it was not a revolution. It was against the earth and it was imposed. It was imposed by the war industry, who, having found that the wars are over, could either have done the right thing, which is fold up those factories. Instead, they continued the wrong thing, which is now rename the war chemicals as agrichemicals. If pesticides came from the gases that kill, including poison gases, fertilizers came, chemical fertilizers, particularly nitrogen-based fertilizers, came from the same factories that made explosives and ammunition. Same IG Farben. And IG Farben was tried in Nuremberg for crimes against humanity. But we forgot. We forgot to recognize these crimes, and we forgot how to bring the criminals to justice. That is the challenge today for every citizen, for every municipality, because I believe in earth democracy. I believe that democracy is not like a bomb being dropped from a drone. Democracy is like a tree that grows from the ground up. It grows from the soil. And therefore, in the next round of change, it is local municipalities, local towns, villages that will have to redefine the agenda. And I think it isn't an accident that it is a festival B with all the participation of local government. So thank you all. But coming back to the story of Punjab, so I did my MSc honors in 1973. By the late 70s, violence had started in Punjab. By 1984, it totally erupted. And the military was sent to the Golden Temple, which is the sacred shrine of the Sikhs. As a result of which, the violence has continued even today. That violence isn't over. But it takes different forms. Indira Gandhi, our prime minister of that time, was assassinated in response with the anger and the outrage of that time. I was in those days working for the United Nations University on a major program of research on peace and global transformation with a focus on conflicts over resources. And the conflicts I was looking at were river conflicts, water conflicts, forest, land conflicts. And I wrote to the UN, I said, something is going on in Punjab and I need to study it. And they agreed. And I studied it, and half the time I had to cancel my trips because the train I was going to be boarding, the track had been blown up. The bus I was going to take had been cancelled because 5 buses before that had been hijacked. And I did that study in 1984 in the middle of the worst violence. It became a book called The Violence of the Green Revolution. That's the period when I understood where the chemicals in farming come from. I understood why Punjab, which in my childhood was a land of diversity, they used to grow 250 crops. Their staple is makki ki roti and sarson ka saag, which means cornbread and mustard greens. You don't see corn. Now you see in one season, one monoculture of wheat. In the next season, one monoculture of rice. Rice never grew in Punjab. And to grow rice in Punjab, a Green Revolution rice, they've had to totally destroy their water systems. In your land, you can't even imagine a water table going down, you know. You have so much water because you're below the sea. But in Punjab, the water table is going down by 1 foot a year. And 63 cubic kilometers of water are drawn out every year. Why? First, you're growing rice. It wasn't a crop there. You're growing it chemically. And my studies have shown that chemical farming uses 10 times more water. Because organic farming returns organic matter to the soil. And by returning organic matter to the soil, it allows the soil to function as a water reservoir. And when it's a water reservoir, you don't have to keep pumping irrigation all the time. But when you use chemicals, you destroy the soil, its life, its water holding capacity. It really now is, as very often is taught in the textbook, an empty container for nitrogen fertilizer. No, soil is the very basis, as the theme of the Congress says. It is the bottom of your health. And in 1984, after my study was done, I took a pledge. I'm trained in physics. This was not supposed to be my field. But I took a pledge then, after that study, that I will work for the rest of my life to create a non-violent farming. I didn't know what it would be because I didn't have a fixed idea except what was wrong. And I knew that biodiversity has to be the basis. And I had trust that, nature couldn't be stupid. Biodiversity is evolutionary intelligence unfolding in our times. And if we look, just look at the assessment. So the Green Revolution created a mess in Punjab in less than 20 years. The biotechnology revolution with its GMOs has already failed. Now that isn't very smart, is it? If you were to measure intelligence, that's not a very good indicator of intelligent agriculture. And it's not intelligent because it is designed from outside through war instruments rather than from inside with the intelligence of biodiversity. Having done the book in 1984, I started to get called to agriculture conferences. And one in 1987 gave the next direction in my life. This was the meeting at which the old chemical industry was there saying, we aren't making enough money. Got to make more money. And the way to make more money is to use the new tools of splicing genes and moving genes through genetic engineering across species. And now we can claim to be inventors of life. It's the patents that will bring us new money, where every farmer, every season will have to buy seeds from us. And the royalties we'll collect will be our future profits. So here I'm sitting, and we had a dialogue. It wasn't a very big meeting. It was a small meeting. And the Ciba Geigies and the Sandoz, these names have disappeared because Ciba and Sandoz joined up, and Astra and Zeneca joined up, and they became Syngenta. And now, last year, Syngenta joined up with ChemChina. And 2 years ago, when we had the Monsanto tribunal in The Hague, it was still Monsanto. Now it is Bayer, because Bayer has bought up Monsanto. And Dow and DuPont have merged. And Dow bought Union Carbide, which was the second reason why I think through nonviolent farming. Because on the night of 2nd December, the same year, 1984, a gas leaked from a pesticide plant owned by Union Carbide in the city of Bhopal and killed thousands of people. The children being born in Bhopal are still maimed and crippled. The women, who very often used to stitch clothes as a living, lost their eyes. The men who would do physical work have their lungs damaged. So those who didn't die have lost their capacity to work. That's why I call it a genocide. In Bhopal, they still call it a genocide. They don't call it an accident because it is in the nature of those chemicals to be able to kill. We are now in an agriculture system where, like IG Farben was a cartel in Hitler's time, tried in Nuremberg. That same cartel has become a cartel of three. And they are not just shaping what we think of as agriculture, what is counted as food. They're shaping knowledge. I don't know how many of you have followed a very important case in the United States, in California, where a groundkeeper whose job was to spray Roundup glyphosate got cancer. And 2 years ago, 3 years ago, when the WHO said glyphosate is a probable carcinogen, they were attacked. But on the basis of that, cases start to come up in the courts of California. And a decision was made by the jury just last month, I think, $280 million Monsanto has to pay Johnson, who has very severe cancer. But 8,000 more cases have been filed. 8,000 cases. And this is only one health impact of the poisons, cancer. Health impacts of infertility, health impacts of damage to future generations. How many of you have seen what's happening with Argentina? You're very lucky your cows graze or get grass or grass and flowers, because so much of Europe is fed on GMO soya from Argentina and Brazil, which has not just destroyed the forests, it is destroying the people. I was in Argentina last year, visiting the areas where they spray from the skies. And even if you're a woman with a little garden, a kitchen garden, you don't have your food because your food's being sprayed to death. And of course, the science is now, we're realizing, so distorted because in this case in California, papers were released. They're called the poison papers. And through discovery, even though Monsanto had been sitting on this documentation, all this has come out in the public now. And what's come out is they plant papers in scientific journals with ghost-written names of scientists who are available for sale. That's why this issue is also about knowledge and science and the freedom of science and stopping the attack on scientists. It's stopping the attack on democracy and our right to know, our right to choose. And I think it's an attack on truth. I come from Gandhi's land. It's 150 years of Gandhi's birth. We are starting to celebrate the birth anniversary. And we started the celebrations, 150th celebrations, in a very beautiful way, a very beautiful biodiversity festival. In 93, a bunch of women, mainly scientists, who were at the Convention on Biological Diversity, which is the international law. And that international law actually requires that we protect biodiversity. And in India, I was part of drafting the national law. It requires that in every village, in every community, there is a biodiversity committee that protects the biodiversity as well as people's rights to it. So in 93, we realized that most of our male colleagues were no more coming to the negotiations. We rang up and said, what's happened? And we've been prevented. And then I realized that the women were still coming because we were so marginal, nobody noticed. So I say, don't feel a victim if you're on the margins. Celebrate the margin because all evolution takes place in the margins. The richest biodiversity is where land and water meet. It's at the edge of ecosystems. So to be on the margin in times where an evolutionary requirement of a new adaptation is there is a good place to be. To be at the heart of a frozen, decaying, collapsing system is not the best place. So we got together. I said, no, we must. Some of my friends are in the 80s and 90s now. I said, before all of them go, let's have a reunion. And I call all the women farmers I work with. We have a whole movement in India called Food Sovereignty in Women's Hands. And that doesn't mean that it's not for all, but it does mean it's the grandmother who knows best. And if we can make our grandmothers the teachers of the transition, what grew in a particular place? The different kinds of foods that used to be cooked. Because we've had a reduction in diversity, not just of what's in our field, but what's on our plate, which are the two other B's in your festival B. Your plate is the board, and of course, your land and your field is the theme of this conference. So the women from across India came, and each of them brought their particular grain, because we used to cook with lots of different grains, not just wheat. And the interesting thing is, Monsanto had taken a patent on an old Indian wheat variety, which does not lead to gluten allergies, which is a very big issue right now in all societies. And it doesn't lead to gluten allergies because we did not breed the wheat for high elasticity for large industrial factories. That's where the gluten allergies are coming from. They're coming from higher expression of elasticity and uniformity. So now the gut feels, I'm under attack. And the response is an allergy. I have fought many cases on what I call biopiracy. And I've just released a whole new book on my 31 years of dealing with the protection of biodiversity and our knowledge, our indigenous knowledge. It's called Origin, the Corporate War on Nature and Culture. And it's got a lot of detail of every law we put in place, every case we fought. We have a wonderful tree called neem, which controls pests without killing the pest, just makes it slow in reproduction. Well, it's a tree of 1,000 uses. We used to use the twigs for brushing our teeth. It's an antibiotic. It is, of course, good antifungal, anti-pest control, but medicinal users, thousands. And a company in the US, along with the US Department of Agriculture, patented it. This was 10 years after I had started a campaign in Bhopal after the disaster, which said, no more Bhopals, plant a neem. The scientific name of neem is Azadirachta indica. 10 years later, I find it's patented. I collected 100,000 signatures. We took all those cases to the European Patent Office, which is in Munich. And I have learned over all these years, how can you be creative through solidarity? Because, the big guys have money. We have love and friendship. That's our capital. So I rang up the head of the Greens in European Parliament, Magda Alwood that time, rang up Linda, who was president of IFARM, the International Federation of Organic Farmers Movement. I said, there's this issue, will you join? I said, I can't keep flying from India. If you take care of the European end of things, I'll take care of the evidence and the signatures. We worked together. We won. There was an appeal. And then it was on March the 8th, I think 2005 maybe, after 11 years of our trust, our love, our friendship, saying we won't give up. We went to the European Court of Justice because of the appeal. The decision had to be made. And there was a break for lunch. And the judge said, come back after lunch. And after lunch, all that he said was, Happy Women's Day, the 8th of March. We had won against a giant corporation and the superpower of the world. 3 women with all of the solidarity with the hundreds of thousands of people. That's the new democracy we have to build. The wheat case, the basmati, I come from Dehradun, which is a beautiful valley. And that's where I've returned to build a biodiversity farm, which is a research farm, a teaching farm, a conservation farm. Right now, if you come, we are growing 750 varieties of rice. Next season, we'll grow 250 varieties of wheat. But Dehradun is famous for the Dehraduni basmati, the original basmati. Basmati means the queen of aroma. A Texas company claimed to have invented it. We had to fight that case too. And now we have managed to reclaim, breed with farmers and grow organically with 500 farmers of Doon Valley, the original Dehraduni basmati. So we begin with a little seed. We begin with a small farmer, and we spread it to the community. And for me, the seed has been a teacher. Because in 1987, when the corporation said, we will now have to take patents on seed through GMOs, I said, but you don't invent the seed. So we'll change that. And in America, they managed. Seed today in America is defined as a manufacture. The Supreme Court judgment said the seed is a self-replicating machine invented by Monsanto. And even if I buy the grain in the market and plant it in my field, it is intellectual property theft. Very famous case, Bauman versus Monsanto. I did 3 things after that meeting of 1987. I said, I'm going to save every seed I can. And I started Navdanya, which means 9 seeds. It also means the new gift of the commons. And we've created 120 community seed banks across the country, seed banks that had salt-tolerant seeds that helped rescue of agriculture after the Orissa super cyclone, after the tsunami, and drought-tolerant seeds, flood-tolerant seeds, seeds with nutrition, because farmers do breeding for biodiversity, for nutrition, and for resilience. Industry does breeding for chemicals and fake food. Why do I say fake food? It's a fake food because once, I think I was at a big food festival in Spain. They left me a big basket of fruit in the hotel room. I picked up a peach. It was tasteless. It was big. Tasteless. I couldn't eat it. I picked up the apple. It tasted the same. There was no apple in the apple. Then I picked up the plum. And the plum had no plum in it. So because we are now basing our food and breeding so much on long-distance transport and long shelf life, we have turned our fruit into rocks. They don't rot. The first GMO was a flavor saver tomato. How many of you have heard of it? Well, the flavor saver tomato was a tomato that would not show the rotting. And I called it the Botox tomato because, old women who don't want to show their age paralyze their nerves, and then you're like that all the time. Well, the Botox tomato was a rotten tomato that wasn't showing its rotting. But it was so hard, and for cooking you want food to dissolve, right? When you put it into a pan, you chop up a tomato, you want it to dissolve. But a tomato just sits there and doesn't become part of the curry. It doesn't get bought. There was no movement against flavor saver, but it never worked. And I remember Jeremy Rifkin and I were in a press conference, and he threw this flavor saver against the wall, and it came bouncing back like a ball. So not only has food been adapted to take more chemicals, it has ended up producing what is not food anymore. I would call it anti-food. And seed that doesn't renew, the very nature of seed is to renew and multiply. The word bija is the name for seed in my language. It means that which arises from in itself again and again and again. That's the power of the seed. Its life is in it. And in that little seed is the future of the carrot. You don't have a Monsanto standing there, carrot, don't become a cabbage. No. Because this external input system assumes that every step needs an instruction. Self-organized systems, which is the new science of complexity and self-organization, the evolutionary code is built into that little seed. So not only did I start saving seeds, I started to work with my government and parliament to make sure we wrote laws. And this book I've just done, we have a case because Monsanto is trying to challenge our laws that exclude patents on plants, animals, and seeds. Because I talked to my parliament and I said, but these are not inventions. And they recognized it. And this is something you'll have to do in your countries. And even if it doesn't work at the European level, even if it doesn't work at the national level, I think we need to start becoming very creative about how we create the context for the shift. Soil is the very basis of health. And we've realized that not only because our food on the farm is so delicious and tasty, and that taste comes from all those amazing phytochemicals and micronutrients that are in the soil. The scientists were now realizing that eating is a conversation. When you eat, your food is conversing with your gut microbiome. And what's in the food is decided by the soil. So, the soil, in a gram of organic soil, you can have 30,000 protozoa, 50,000 algae, 400,000 fungi. 1 teaspoon of living soil contains 1 billion bacteria. This is the life of the soil. And it's this life of the soil that makes health. So healthy soils and farmers who make healthy soils are our true physicians. So we've just completed a 20-year study in our valley on the Navdanya farm and the farms of members of Navdanya. And the data, even the scientists, the soil scientists who did the study, his mind was blown. He couldn't believe it. Because the theory of soil fertility based on agrochemical inputs makes you think very differently. So the organic matter has gone down in the chemical farms by 14%, whereas In the organic farms has gone up between 29 to 99%. But the interesting one is nitrogen. In farms fertilized with chemical fertilizer, the nitrogen content has decreased 7 to 22%. It has increased up to 100% in soils that have not got chemical fertilizer, because these soil organisms are making your nitrogen. Zinc deficiency, global problem. They're trying to do genetic engineering for zinc deficiency. It's 37% decline in the chemical farms. That's where you have nutritionally empty food, because your soil is now empty. 14.3% increase in organic. So the crisis of micronutrient deficiency, to which genetically engineered biofortification of golden rice, of GM banana, are offered as a solution, can be so simply solved. Carotene is so high on our farms because we did, instead of measuring yield per acre of nutritionally empty toxic food, we measure nutrition per acre, not yield per acre, nutrition per acre. And I'll just show you some graphs. On protein, that's how much the biodiversity gives us. Carotene, you don't need golden rice. Thiamine, folic acid, iron. 75% women in my country have iron deficiency. But the iron has been robbed from them, both by robbing the soil of nutrition, but also of robbing them of the diversity that gives the rich nutrition. And iron by itself, you can give an iron pill, but it won't get absorbed. You can give spinach, but it needs that little bit of vitamin C, of sour. And that's why in Indian Ayurveda, we are told, eat 6 tastes daily. Eat all the tastes. That's the diversity and the balance. Now, Ayurveda also always said that the balance of health begins with food. And it called food sarva oshadhi, the food for all, the food as medicine. And it says that if you eat good food, you don't need medicine. And if you eat bad food, no medicine can solve your health problems. And they always talked about the gut, the belly, as the core of where the interaction with food takes place. Just 10 years ago, the Western medicine is waking up to the gut microbiome. That there are trillions and trillions of gut microbes, each of them with sensors for the different tastes. And in the West, they're still puzzled, but why do we need bitter? The neem is bitter, the Karela is bitter, but I remember coming in the long, ancient days to Europe, and they would serve a bitter after a meal. You remember there were days, the bitters, that even in the diet of the West, the bitter was recognized as a very important element. Not only are we 90% not us, which I think would be a very, very good place to begin from getting off the high pedestal of anthropocentrism, that man is at the center of the universe. No, even we ourselves, as our bodies, are only 10% us. So let's begin becoming humble and taking care of our fellow beings within us, but also our fellow beings outside us. And the biodiversity outside and the biodiversity inside is deeply connected. It's either connected in a decaying planet, where 75% of the destruction of the soil, of the water, 50% of the damage of the climate, as I've written in my book, Soil Not Oil, and 90% of biodiversity erosion. Whether it's the plants themselves or all the beings that the plants support, it could be the pollinators and the insects, it could be the birds. We are in a moment of extinction. Scientists are calling it the 6th mass extinction. A UN report has said if we don't in the next 10 years change track from business as usual, life will be impossible for our species. It already is impossible for a large percentage of our fellow humans, which is why you have the refugee crisis. The refugees of today are those who are being driven out of their homes and their lands because of the destruction and devastation of their soil by the spread of greed, industrial agriculture, and commodity trading. The Lake Chad, 80% of the water was prevented from flowing into it in order to grow commodities for trade. The Lake Baikal, which is the lake, it's gone. Because these industrial farming is a very thirsty farming. It's insatiable. And at the end of it, what is it giving us? A disease-creating system. The moment has come to reconnect to the soil. And remember, the soil, which in Latin is referred to as humus, which is also the word in organic farming we use for fertile soils, it is also the root of the word humus, of the word human. We are the soil. When we destroy the soil, we are destroying our own future. And in the old Vedas, we have a beautiful saying, in this handful of soil lies your future. If you take care of it, it will take care of you. If you destroy it, it's going to destroy you. And every civilization that has gone because its soil was destroyed. But today, it's a planetary threat where if in the next 10 years we shift things around, we have a future. Otherwise, as you know, so many of the brilliant men keep saying, there are only two options, extinction or escape. And for them, the escape is to Mars. And Elon Musk is selling $1 billion tickets on his SpaceX. No, there is a third option that caring, thinking, responsible human beings are taking everywhere. That third option is take care of the earth, take care of your soil, take care of all the bees that this planetary festival and the Festival of Bee is celebrating. And we won't be extinct, and we won't have to escape, because in any case, there's no other place to escape to. You know, Elon Musk gave this interview. It was unbelievable. That I've got tickets for 1 billion, and 1 million people could move out, and I don't know what will happen to the rest. Of course, he's not thinking of other species. But the most important point, he said, is, and slowly we will learn to ship elements from the earth to have a Pizza Hut. If that's the level. You know, I think we're in a problem because between Bill Gates, who can't go beyond a hamburger, and Elon Musk, who can't go beyond a Pizza Hut, they are making the plans for this planet because they've accumulated billions with a thoroughly dishonest economic model, which has infiltrated into agriculture. We've got to create true economy, true democracy, real food, which only real farmers and real soil can promote. So last year, we do an annual Festival of the Earth, something like what you're doing here. And the mayor of Mars had come down. That's the village up in the Alps in Italy that went poison-free. Our villages are poison-free. Navdania's villages practice living democracy, and they ban chemicals, GMOs, patents, any destruction, privatization of water, and they join hands, 200 villages, representative 200 villages, and the Italian mayor, to create a poison-free world, food and farming, by the year 2050. Basically, we think if we can do it today, surely by the year 2050, the planet can make a shift. It's a long time, right? The children of today will be the elders of tomorrow by that time. And I would be so happy if out of your festival Bee, out of the International Congress that Martin had organized yesterday, out of the Biodiversity Congress and the Festival of Our Bread, Our Freedom that we did on 2nd October, we start creating a network from the ground up, where we start saying we don't want poisons, and this is what we will do. We will grow good food, we will grow biodiverse food, we'll have fresh food, we'll create circular economies, and we will not obey with laws that prevent us from taking care of the earth and our children. That's the lesson Gandhi taught us. Satyagraha, the force of truth. He said, when there are higher laws to be obeyed and lower laws that are based on injustice and brute force interfere in the higher laws, it is your duty to not obey. And we are in a time where the poison makers are going to use centralized institutions to not allow a ban on glyphosate, to not allow a ban on GMOs. They're now coming with these new gene-edited GMOs, which the European Court of Justice has said are GMOs, but they're trying very hard to say they're not GMOs, they're natural. And therefore they should not be regulated. It's going to be very interesting times. But never before have people in small communities had the power to make big change by doing the right thing. And you're part of that change. Thank you for having me here.